What's up, folks? We are back for week 3 of Modern Horror Auteur Directors Month, and we're going to talk about Mike Flanagan's Gerald's Game. Zach's here, looking.
Hey, is that our most ridiculous title for a month? Like, just too many words. Our Horror Auteur Directors.
Modern Horror Auteur Directors?
Modern Horror Auteur Directors.
I mean, Movies on Islands Month sounded pretty goofy, but it's shorter.
This is the one that makes it sound like we're the most up our ass.
Yeah. I mean, if you've listened to if you've seen like more than a couple months of our show, a lot of the topics are a bit weird. We have some topics that are more normal, but most of them are like
the topics. I think normal. We just made it sound as like pretentious as possible.
That's fair. Talking about Gerald's Game. Before we do that, let's do a little last.
Are you sure you don't want to play Gerald's Game? That's what I thought we were doing here tonight. We're going to live recreate Gerald's Game.
Am I handcuffing you to the bed, or are you handcuffing me to the bed?
I think we do it simultaneously. Then we both are trapped because there's no one let us go. And then we have.
Which one of us is more likely to have a heart attack after? Which one of us is more likely to have a heart attack?
Me? You take good care of your body. Who knows? Who knows what you're putting in your body?
I mean, here's the thing. I think I'm in better physical shape, but I also redline myself more maybe than you do.
I do not know what that word means.
Will like push myself to like the extremes.
Yeah.
You forget I used to have a caffeine intake of
makes me concerned about your health.
You forget I used to have the caffeine intake of a water buffalo.
Yeah.
Now we've gotten silly already. It's always a good sign for the episode if we're ridiculously sillier than the first.
Happens when we tape 2 episodes in a row.
Maybe we taped 2 episodes in a row. Maybe we didn't. Maybe we haven't taped for months.
Look at our shirts. Did we change? Did we not? We should have changed.
We should have just taken our shirts off. Should have taken it. If there's any episode we should have
Gerald's game. You can't wear clothes during Gerald's game.
Should just gone straight up, just some undies. Before we get canceled by the collective culture, let's do the last Letterboxd movie. Zach, what is the last thing you logged?
I don't watch movies anymore. I just don't. I just like.
He plays video games though.
I crawl my way through life. Is what I do.
Crawls. Theo teaching you how to crawl.
Just like crawling half alive, groaning. So at some point while I'm lying on the ground, taking my last breath, the movie The Fog played over me. John Carpenter's Fog. Me and you are both kind of watching our way through Carpenter's for the Bank Check podcast to kind of follow along with them. And this one, kind of gets dismissed as lesser Carpenter. And my hottest of takes is I enjoy this movie more than Halloween because of things that I think Halloween is lacking to keep my interest is kind of what I need within horror movies, which is the deeper, richer mythology and atmosphere rather just the gun for the kills. But the Fog is like it's kind of a goofy ass ghost story in a way that I kind of eat up and enjoy. I like the movies about the same. So this is not that hot of a take, but if I have to rewatch a movie like tonight, it's The Fog, just because there's like plot to it and like it's like you're hearing a campfire story at night by like your sailor grandpa telling you this weird ass thing about dead sailor lepers. You just told me that like psycho killing babysitters or leper sailor ghosts. Like, which one are you going to be into? I feel like it's easy. It has to be The Fog. Or is the lepers.
Yeah, but The Fog doesn't exist without Halloween. And Halloween is way scarier and has a way better story. Now, I'm not going to knock The Fog at all because after watching
the Halloween is a better executed movie. I just have a lot more fun.
Which is hilarious because I actually believe I have The Fog rated higher than you.
Yeah. Well, not a Carpenter guy.
I actually am really digging Carpenter.
We'll talk about Starman on this episode once. His truly best film.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet. We'll see what I think. I will say I've watched the first 5 Carpenters. First 6, counting. I haven't watched the thing yet. But The Fog, probably number 2. Carpenter kind of kills as a horror dude. He's really good at it.
There's Lighthouse. We've talked about Lighthouses.
Lighthouse is always good.
We've done 2. Our unofficial Lighthouse month was last month.
You did?
But
I mean, also, I will always support watching a movie where Tom Atkins sleeps with a woman who's 25 years younger than him, and she's just like really into it.
And she like went for it. It was under her initiative.
She's fucking went for it. I mean, like mad respect to the legend of this Jamie Lee Curtis. Yeah, The Fog's really fun. I don't know why people don't talk about it. Like, I don't think it's as good as Halloween. Like, Halloween is, genre defining. But yeah, I don't know why the Fog gets
a better movie to watch on Halloween because of just it's like not scary, it's spooky. Like it's like goof. Like to me, Halloween should be a little more goofy, a little more monster based. And that thing, and The Fog is playing in that ground.
I genuinely wonder if Halloween is so good and so beloved and so well regarded that because the Fog isn't as good, it gets like dinged even more than it would normally. Like if a normal director had made a 3.5 star horror movie and then another 3.5 star horror movie, would The Fog be better regarded than if it was the movie that he did after
I feel like if it was like an early Wes Craven movie, it might have a higher esteem because people just have a different expectations for an early Wes Craven movie is.
Or like he done it first. If he does The Fog first, I mean, Halloween's still probably the better movie, but it probably is not as ignored as much because it's seen as a precursor rather than a fallback. And sometimes I think it just gets dinged because
it's just not as cool. It is. I said it's sillier.
It's definitely not as cool
in a lot of ways. Yeah.
It's also just like you don't remember anything from The Fog the same way you remember stuff from Halloween. Halloween has these like really famous shots, really famous images, sounds, and things that are just like stick with you. You see the movie once and they stick with you for 40 years.
And Halloween's elevating, not doing something new, but elevating that specific slasher genre. I mean, this is really like just a homage to these kind of 1940s, 1950s horror movies. Like he loved the Howard Hawks stuff, and
it does feel a little
like the universal horror movies essentially is what like this and then nothing are really playing with.
They love putting Fog in those universal monster movies. Big fans of Fog.
Yeah, Fog's the best. Honestly, my ideal habitat. Like I just want to live in all fog all the time. Sun sucks.
I like sun.
Hang out with leopard ghosts. You'd probably cool hang.
I think you would fit very well in the Fog. You could do our podcast from the lighthouse. It's really, we've debated this.
We're going to do this once. We're going to find out an Airbnb lighthouse. We're going to find it and do live episodes.
This is after both of our significant others ditch us, and we end up very sad.
And after we reenact Gerald's game in the lighthouse.
I feel like if we reenact Gerald's game ever, we might lose our significant others for good. They might be like, and you two are fucking morons. We're good. Yeah. The Fog.
Look at you bragging about having a significant other in Cam. We don't talk about.
I just try. I don't bring in like details, but I'm not hiding it. That'd be weird. Yeah. Imagine if I was like.
You haven't discussed your child yet either on this.
My children. I have more children than you do.
Oh yeah, forgot.
One of them might only be part human. Okay, so The Fog. You're having fun with that. I decided to watch the Twilight franchise for the first time because it's been so many years. And Blank Check was also covering those on a Patreon miniseries.
We only do what Blank Check tells us to. This is the moral of this segment.
We basically made a podcast because we love Blank Check, and that kind of brought us together. So I last night watched the Twilight Saga Eclipse, which is the third one. And when all the sort of weird sexual politics of this franchise really start being sort of blatantly in our faces and kind of icky, it's like the first movie's kind of goofy and it's kind of fun to watch because the dialogue is so goofy and weird, and it starts building out the world. And then the second movie is like kind of completely pointless. Like nothing happens in the entire film, and you could sort of just skip it because it doesn't build. And the third one is when it starts getting really creepy. And the fact that like this love triangle was the thing that people debated, like. They kind of all suck. Is that a hot take? I mean, Edward is probably the least sucky of the group.
That all these Mormons suck?
Yeah, the politics of this is like really pro abstinence to like an extreme level, and like also really weirdly like teenage marriage is a good thing. Like there is parts of this movie where like they refuse to touch each other and barely kiss each other, but also like debate should they get married at 17 years old, and it's kind of icky and weird looking back at. And also, so you have this love triangle. Jacob's a dick, and fuck him. Bella is probably even a bigger dick because don't pick somebody and then constantly keep playing with the other dude. just makes you a shitty person. Edward is a weirdo, but at least like
sounds like just hate all people involved in love triangles. You're just describing the normal person involved in love triangle.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Are there good love triangles in movies? I'm trying to think of that. Like one person's always a dick in them. Well, actually, it's not. It shouldn't even be really a love triangle because she committed to one of them, and then it just keeps being a love triangle. It's like one of the weirder film choices.
But a lot of them are like the Hunger Games love triangle is not really a love triangle. It's a love line and one person looking from the outside. Very sadly.
Yeah, it's a couple and third wheel.
Because like Liam Hemsworth really has nothing to do. Like he's not really in the game.
Part of the couple.
Really actor.
Or like you have like legit love triangles where two men are trying like you know what's a good love triangle? It's like classic movies have good love triangles because it's like a girl
Casablanca.
She needs to get right because it's like because it's a girl.
The third guy really in the movie,
and two people are trying to win her affection, and it's not like weird, and she hasn't like nobody just they don't look shitty. Yeah, I don't know. Twilight. It's really weird watching. I will say, as much as the politics of this franchise are sort of disturbing, and like I said this to you the other day, I was like, for a franchise that's trying so hard to look hot, it is weirdly incredibly sex negative. It's a very weird in that choices. I do think though
an ideal of what is steamy and arousing. It's like she's like revealing her deepest instincts, but also her guilt is making her repress it at the same time. Within Stephanie Meyer's writing,
there's a really creepy like I'm regretting kissing you moment where I'm like, okay, I hope too many children weren't. I like how most children were not like forever harmed by the just ridiculous take this franchise is. I do think though the one thing I will say from an outside perspective is that watching this now, it is weird that Twilight has such a negative rap compared to other franchises. If we're being real, this is roughly the same quality level as like the Star Wars prequels, and I think that there's you can make a statement saying if you look at franchises that are designed for men versus franchises that are designed for women, sometimes those male franchises, while being really shitty, can get critical reappraisal and like constant fandom, while the female franchises
actually is a lens on the film, the drastically male film bubble that we live in. That we think Twilight has this negative impact, because if you talk to other people and if you talk to the average female viewer, Twilight still lives on and thrives on and as big as Star Wars for some people. It's just because we live in a male bubble, we hear all this negative discussion.
I mean, that's definitely true. I actually hadn't seen like I tried to look at stuff to see if even people who are outside of our bubble really like Twilight. People seem pretty negative overall.
I know a number of teachers and people who adore Twilight.
Okay, that's good to know, because if it is sort of ridiculous that that
in
franchise
adore
got
maybe
pushed.
In the slightly like we get that this is kind of campy and trashy, but like also I can watch this every day.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that, because there's so many like things where I'm just like, yeah, there's a lot of shitty male franchises that get reappraisal, and this doesn't. I'm glad to know that at least somewhere. This is
I think they could like release a spin-off thing and it would be highly successful still.
I'd be interested to see that, because I feel like I don't know if Twilight has continued down the generations. Like I don't know if like Harry Potter has been picked up by every subsequent generation over and over, and it's not just
less
popular.
so than you think.
No, I think it
as
has,
a teacher
though.
Around my kids, it's just not as big of a deal. Only
Really?
with like counterculture kids. Like kids who are a little more interested just in like books in general.
I just feel like, and if you just look at, I mean, that may be true in that scenario, but I think if you just look at the data in terms of like the book sales and stuff, it still seems to be succeeding very much. I don't know if Twilight has the same carry out down to the generations. Like,
yeah, I think with kid culture, it's just like it's superheroes. That's the dominant thing that I noticed.
Yeah, I think it's also just tough.
And just like any streaming kids movie. My fourth grade students, Vivo, that's their shit. They know every line to Vivo because it's available for them. It's really weird to me. They're just all big Lin-Manuel Miranda heads. That's what really 9-year-olds want.
It's a weird choice. Yeah, Twilight. Interesting franchise. It's been weird. It's been interesting watching it so many years removed from when this was actually like a thing. Let's talk about our main event of the evening. We're talking Gerald's Game, the Mike Flanagan film. Before we go into Gerald's Game, let's talk about Mike Flanagan, the director.
Yeah.
So we talked about how Ty West was
He has to be Irish. His name's Mike Flanagan, right? We do our research here.
Salem, Massachusetts.
Oh, boring. He's Irish descent. I actually thought he was from Ireland. So now I have a whole different look on his career.
I don't know if he's. It doesn't say anything about his parents. So we've talked about how Ty West was sort of the complete control, really, really indie guy who made his movies for sort of nothing. Yeah. Jordan Peele was sort of the wonderkind, the guy who kind of jumps onto the screen and from the beginning gets, a lot pretty decent budgets and a lot of stuff going on. And Mike Flanagan is sort of in the line of Ty West, but a bit more of a studio guy.
He's a studio guy.
He really is. He really feels like his job as a director is to deliver a movie on budget, on time, and kind of just competently produced. He's somebody, he did some student films, he did some short films, and then he makes Absentia in 2011, Oculus in 2013, Hush, Before I Wake, and We Shall Order to Evil, all three in 2017, and Gerald's Game 2016.
You're like he's an elevated version of what the Blumhouse person would be. Like a good Blumhouse director would be Mike Flanagan. He just works with Netflix instead.
Well, I mean, he did Oculus with Blumhouse.
So that was okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, then he did Hush. That's Netflix. Or I don't know if it was originally Netflix.
It was Netflix. He's done 4 or 3 Netflix projects.
No, Hush also Blumhouse.
But it was released.
Purchased by Netflix, okay. Distributed by Netflix. Yeah, he's actually worked with Blumhouse several times, which is unsurprising because he certainly has the aesthetic that fits kind of what they want. Mike Flanagan. So this is where I think he's in some ways the person who fits our month the best, and simultaneously is the least interesting to talk about.
Yeah, he does have a specific style, so I think he is easily an auteur because
he only makes horror movies.
Of what he thinks of horror movies,
and he only makes horror movies. He doesn't make any other genres. He is completely focused on horror, and even when he does television, he's completely focused on horror.
And my idea is he's just such a I think he's just such a say a studio director in a way, such a businessman. I think his ideas. I don't even know if that was his goal, but he's just gonna take. He got known as the horror guy, so I'm going to be the horror guy. I'm placing upon this. I don't know him, of course, but my idea is he's just going to keep directing horror because that's what studios want from him, and it doesn't bother him. He's not someone that I think with a grand ambition to get rid of the idea that people see him. I think he's happy enough, to have a career, a successful career.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who gets about $5 to $10 million every movie. He usually makes 8 to 10 times that amount and back. So he's just somebody who's clearly successful. He's also for a studio guy, he writes, directs, and edits all his movies. He has complete control of them. He has the Ty West, but he has it on a little bit larger scale. And I think that's because his sensibilities is, I think, just more studio oriented. He understands how to make a movie that a studio can market and push. He's not really somebody who flops a lot. He's somebody who, his Netflix movies seem to do well on the streaming services.
They're easy to sell. Usually they have concepts. We talked about shitty horror trailers on our Malignant episode. But these movies are more easily packaged to be in those trailers that can bring in audiences.
Yeah, I mean, he'll make a movie for $8 million and then the movie makes 80. And it's why wouldn't the studio want to keep going back to this guy?
Gerald's Game on Netflix, and from all accounts, highly successful in opening weekend. Big Hollywood, they can sell it. They get people to watch it. They can see the picture, watch the trailer, and they're sure, turn it on.
Yeah, he seems to just kind of he knows what he's doing, and he rarely has.
He's also unofficially Stephen King guy. He's done 2 Stephen King projects.
He is a Stephen King guy.
Or just literary adaptations in general, because Haunting of Hill House also. No famous. There's a Shirley Jackson, right? Shirley Jackson book. If I make that up. No, I'm confusing everything, but maybe.
So that actually brings us. We talked a little bit about Mike Flanagan, kind of his deal.
Do we want to talk about whether we like Mike Flanagan's thing?
No, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there in a second. I was trying to figure out Yes,
just
Notting
one
Hill
last
House
thing.
is
Before
based
I'm
on a
gonna,
novel.
I'm going to try to say this without editorializing any opinions into it, but because I feel like people could argue like he's not an auteur, he doesn't have like ideas that transfer from movie to movie, but I think his auteur-like ideas is its style and tone. I think there's
Yes.
such a consistency in his tonality, and we'll talk more about that. I think it's actually less in this film than his other films. There's a real like extra icy quality, I think, in the pacing of all his movies. They're weirdly quiet. They're not the kind of loud, shocking, shrieking sounds that you get with other horror films. He works a lot within this kind of the eeriness of silence.
Not really a jump scare guy, not really like the Wan school, but I also think it's impossible to ignore the fact that a guy who works for studios consistently makes money and consistently gets to direct, edit, and write his own films clearly has some auteur tendencies. You don't get to have full control of your film if you're not an auteur in some level. If he was just a studio guy, if he wasn't an auteur, he would just take somebody else's script and somebody else would edit his film, and he'd only be involved in that one specific process.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Stephen King. Stephen King adaptations have kind of been around for forever. You can go back to Carrie, Shining, Christine, Creepshow, Pet Sematary. All Night, Green Mile. There's so many ones. They did a bunch of them. And then, so this is actually, funnily enough, a year that is full of adaptations of Stephen King. So we get
this was coming out as like part of this
The Dark
King
Tower,
Renaissance,
which is atrocious, really bad.
I will never watch it. Should I read the book? Should we start a book club? Lucas and Zack book club and do an extra episode?
School killed me reading. I will say getting degrees killed my interest.
Do you know it's really good to get your reading back? Audiobooks while you get ready for work in the morning. That's how I do it, baby.
I'm a podcast guy, so I got to stick to it. And then Gerald's Game, and something called 1922. Several of these being released on Netflix. And then 2 years later, they get Pet Sematary, the second In the Tall Grass, which is another Netflix one, and then Dr. Sleep. So he's involved in this really big bump in Stephen King.
I didn't realize the Scary Grass movie was also Stephen King. Of course he made Scary Grass.
Of course. Stephen King is interesting that I have never read a Stephen King book, but I know that Stephen King as a writer is very famous for having his tics, his things, his ideas. Yeah. A lot of his films revolve around certain themes and just ideas about life and like growth, and so people who like his stuff tend to like it because
I have read Stephen King because I'm not a Philistine.
Wow. Okay. That's fair.
You know what's funny? Calling someone not reading Stephen King a Philistine.
I'm like
the great art of literature.
Real trashy words you're throwing in my face here.
But yeah, I agree, and I think this is almost more of a Stephen King movie than it is. Mike Flanagan movie is way because the narrative structure of it is so gimmicky in a way that you have to tie it to Stephen King.
Let's answer the question that you brought up earlier, and that is, do you like the Mike Flanagan aesthetic?
I hate it. I honestly hate it so much. His movies don't work for me because I find them. I said chilliness, and I put that in a negative tense. Just so cold that I feel so distant the whole time that I can never connect. I want to admire him, and I'm glad people like it because he is doing something. They are almost like slow core horror movies in a way, but the pacing is so deliberate in a way that I don't find boring. I'm not bored, but I feel distance. I feel this a little less in Gerald's Game because I think there's so much Stephen Kingness to it that does this. But Dr. Sleep, that movie has such a low tone to it that I can't connect to the characters, and they never feel real. It's such distant from a reality for me, and not in like a fun alternate reality, but like the most chilly version of what our life is. There's like lacks a humanity, I think, to his direction.
So I will say I am not as negative as you, but I will also say that I don't really find Mike Flanagan that makes anything better than about a 3.5 star movie. He is, to me, the best I can say about him is Mike Flanagan is competent. I rarely am angry at his movies. But he does have a very forgettable aesthetic. I don't find his movies on the whole particularly interesting. A lot of times, what sets Mike Flanagan apart to me is that he has oftentimes very good ideas for movies that are not completely like executed or like worked upon. I think of stuff like Hush, which is like a really interesting premise for a movie, and sort of ends up just being like, you know, a good to okay horror movie.
Slight. They always come off very slight.
It feels like he's always underselling it. Like he's another person that really should lean in a little bit harder to his premises. Like it feels like he almost feels like, to me, he feels like the person who is both sides. You know, like you have those friends, or you know somebody, like their thing is they both sides every issue because they never want to annoy anyone. They never take an actual stand. They never like pick a side because they just want to be friends with everybody. Like their goal in life is not to have like a clear like idea of what that person is. They just want to be friends with everybody. So that's what he always feels like. He's like, I'm going to make a movie about this, but like I just to be safe, just to make sure that people don't get mad at that premise, I'm going to tone it down just enough so that if you like it, you'll be into it. But if you hate it, it won't turn you off. And it feels like he never fully commits to anything in his films. And so I end up leaving them kind of just ho-hum. He's not my favorite, but he was
I
also
feel like he tries so hard. Grounded's not the right word, but he's like a very serious horror film director, and he avoids any concept of camp whatsoever. And I feel like sometimes in horror, especially with some of the plots he deals with, you have to embrace the fun of it all and not just try to make it like horror from dreariness and horror from, I said, that eeriness of silence. Sometimes you just gotta laugh in your horror movies from the kind of scares they're pulling off, and he does not have the ability to have that scream followed by a laugh in any of his movies. Those can't generate that. That's not how they're designed.
There's just like, I guess I was just thinking about this. Clearly, there's just like a lack of fun in them. Like there's not fun kills. There's not like fun scares.
There's like they're morose.
They kind of just happen. Like, and Gerald's Game is kind of a good example of this. The movie never has fun with the ridiculousness of the situation or like the scariness of the situation.
It's
or like
such
the
a downer. It
is kind of a down. And the weird thing is it's weird because it is a downer, but the movie does not play itself as a downer, which kind of makes it.
It's going to be very interesting to compare this to Midsummer. That I'm spoiling, but we're going to talk about Midsummer next week.
And that's a movie that is loving.
But in a way that's so fucking grueling in a lot of ways, but they're able to find the right amount of like levity and humanity throughout that movie that this movie wants to be grueling. It's like grueling without the plot being grueling. He just makes it a grueling experience.
Yeah.
It can't find the humanity within that. I think is missing.
And that's because Ari Aster's a better director.
The Mike Flanagan Hive is going to come at you.
I'm completely fine with that. I think
there is Mike Flanagan High. That's why I still want to like do this movie. Especially with like High on Hill House, there's like a real fan base that like eats up his shit.
No, there's clearly a fan base for him. That's why we ended up, adding this to the list. Is that he clearly counts as somebody who you want to do for this month. Let's jump into
the actual movie.
Let's jump into the actual movie. Let's do a little plot summary. Do you want to go first or should I?
I'm too tired. I can't do it.
All right. So couple goes to a house in the woods. They're like, our marriage seems to be failing. We need to do some stuff. So they decide to do they're doing some sexy times.
They're doing Gerald's Game, baby. It's the game.
Yes. He takes some Viagra. They put her some handcuffs on her.
There's some signs that this is like a way to recover their marriage.
They're maybe trying some stuff that's a little bit outside their comfort zone because other stuff is not working. And then Gerald has a heart attack.
Well, it turns into kind of a rape fantasy, which is really important. You got to talk about that.
Does turn into he seems to have a rape fantasy that
she starts to push away from it.
He does not seem to have mentioned this previously, and then he ends up having a heart attack. A dog shows up. It starts to eat Gerald. Then we start having all these flashbacks, and you sort of get alternate versions of both characters in like ghost form, sort of talking about everything that's going wrong. She's trying to escape. She can't. She has these like memories. She has a flashback to her father and like some bad shit that happened in her childhood. there's some kind of villainous, disfigured character that's coming around.
That's just like metaphorical and thematic and does not matter to the plot.
Although it clearly does, because they tack on a weird. We'll talk about that, because we have to talk about that. She cuts her wrists because blood is slippery, and that helps her get out of the handcuffs. She escapes.
There's a lot of flashbacks throughout the time of when she's trying to deal with it. Because it is from her getting locked into her cutting her wrist is like 45 minutes.
Yes, and a lot of that is because
not a lot of action other than her like getting a glass of water and figuring out how to grab things. But a lot of it is filled up with the flashbacks to her childhood trauma, being sexually abused by her father.
In a particularly weird way that seems very much Stephen King like. It's not. The dad doesn't actually touch her. He just does he weirdly has her sit on his lap and then masturbates. And
we'll talk about this as one of my issues with film, but part that I think, I don't want to say saves it, but puts it a little more in the other way is that there's a lot more focus to the mental abuse that goes with that situation. So it's going with not just him jerking off with her.
It's the weird manipulation.
But it's the trapping her in a box by getting her to hold in that secret. Manipulating her to
believe that her mother would be angry at her if the information came out
and blame herself for the situation. Which, as an adult, that's still her instinct is to blame herself, and you see that with the flashback as well.
Yes. So then she escapes. She crashes. People come out and rescue her. Later, she's writing a letter to her 12-year-old self. She starts a foundation, and then we start hearing news reports of some kind of serial killer who has this disease called acromegaly, which results from excess human growth hormone. So essentially everything grows too much. And he steals stuff and eats male corpses' faces and all this weird shit. And then gets caught.
He ate the face off of Gerald.
Yes. And then she goes to see him at the courtroom as he's being sentenced, and looks at his face and then says something and then walks out. And
you're not as terrifying up close as it kind of symbolic.
You're much smaller.
All the male monsters in her life holding her back aren't scary when she deals with it and confronts it.
Yeah, we need to talk about that ending, the last 10 minutes, because I have a thought about why it's there, and I'm wondering if you agree. Let's just do that first. The ending feels tacked on. It feels really tacked on. And we didn't need it. You didn't really need to see that person was a real person rather than some kind of figment of her imagination messing with her. Tell me if I'm wrong. That ending feels like what happens when you give a cut of a movie to a studio, and the studio executives go, well,
what's the lesson here?
No, you need to show us why that person was there, prove that he's show he's real, make the bad guy actually a real thing. And that's what it feels like. It feels very tacked on.
No, I think it's on there to provide closure. I think forced closure. I think there is closure, but to really make the talking down the audience to be this is how she can resolve her internal issues with her past harassment, with her kind of modern marriage, by going up to this monster and saying, I'm not scared of you and I'm not scared of everyone anymore. So we can really understand that she's moved forward and is a survivor, rather than us just being able to interpret that later. I think it's the easiest way to make us seem that there's no other reason that thing is there other than for that reason.
It's a sort of too obvious. It's sort of
tying the bow very tight.
Well, it's sort of like you tied the bow, and then you're like, well, maybe I should triple knot it just to be 100% clear that this is the point we're making. Because it really
this
feels
movie is extremely thematically focused.
Yes,
in a way that I think is too much.
This is actually a good point, which is that it is interesting that this movie is 103 minutes long. And for 85 of them, it is her handcuffed to a bed having flashbacks.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a choice. It doesn't always work. It's a little bit. You sort of wonder why they didn't give you more of an insight into their relationship before that happened, or like why they didn't show more after. Like it just, or like even why she didn't spend more time trying to.
What do you do with like make that plot last longer in the middle? If they show it ahead of time, she's going to be locked up for 10 minutes and then get out.
Yeah, I mean, they also maybe could have showed her trying to escape more and failing, because it really does feel like she, every 45 minutes in the film, has like an idea of how to escape, and then just
kind of live in the horror of it. Really, you don't really get to deal with it because of the flashbacks. You never really get to feel the threat of her losing her life because there's so much extra things going on in between the flashbacks and the voiceovers that you never get to live in her pain. Which, do you want that? Maybe not.
I think the movie is more impactful if you get at least some experience of her pain. A lot of times horror movies, especially movies like this, if it's not about jump scares, sometimes they make you, they impact you because you're forced to experience what kind of suffering the individuals in the story are undergoing. Outside of that one scene where she wakes up after the night of being chained up, we don't really understand any of her experience. Like, it's thrown in here, there, oh, it hurts to write with my hand because I cut myself. Like, but like all these, like the actual like cost of what she had to do, they're clearly just way more interested in what the cost of it is mentally and like psychologically.
I think they're more interested in her trauma than the actual ongoing traumatic event that she's facing. They're more interested in the past trauma and how it ties to it. They're interested in the sexual politics and sexual trauma of it all, rather than the survival being trapped to a bed trauma. Which that's why I say it's thematically purposeful, because her being tied to a bed does not have much like thematic depth to it.
Yeah.
But in a way that, I feel like in the way this is almost two different movies, and this is where my suffering comes, because not that her like trauma and her past struggle isn't interesting, or that I do think they have even interesting things to say. I say that the idea of her seeming like the worst thing to happen was being trapped in the mental cage, I think is a really interesting idea, and I think done kind of well. And I think the flashbacks honestly are the most chilling parts of the movie, but I don't think they do a good job at connecting it to the event of her being locked in the bed. There's really no real connection between the ideas other than her husband also kind of sexually manipulating her in a way, but then that's done and she's just trapped in the bed, and her surviving and being able to use her wits to get herself out has nothing to do with her sexual trauma. And they can't make that linked other than her like, oh, remember like this weird 1 second thing that didn't really have to do with trauma, but was in that moment of like how you can grab this or get the water. And it was in such a convenient kind of does this machina way that doesn't work. Like the sexual harassment really has nothing to do with her trying to survive getting out of the bed.
Yeah, it feels like they take one moment of her husband having a potential rape fantasy and turn that into, let's do 45 minutes of flashbacks about your past sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And
which maybe that rape fantasy is what spurs that, but that is
doesn't really connect after that.
The issue that is at hand at that point. The issue is that she is trapped in the bed and is going to starve to death, and the ghosts make it seem that the issue is no longer her husband. You can make those connections with the husband and manipulating him without her having to go through them.
And the sexual abuse the backstory of her sexual abuse is way more about feeling like she's being played between her mom and her dad than it is about actually what the dad did. Like, it's way more of her guilt out of that seems to be, oh, my mom doesn't seem to like me. She thinks I like my dad more. And now, like, my mom would be mad if we ever told about this. It's way more about the mental manipulation.
Yeah, it's about, which is the same with her husband. It's about the men they literally say keeping her in a box or in a cage. I don't remember the word, but about the men in her life constantly dominating her and her now existing this cycle of keeping her into those kind of relationships.
Yeah, and I don't know.
In a way that they're using this, and it's uncomfortable to also connect that to a film about a thrilling survival. Like,
is that the reason
it's so deep and so grueling in a way with something that's supposed to be kind of thrilling? It's a weird connection. I think the weird use of sexual harassment, which it's really hard to use sexual harassment in a movie that I think is intelligent and thoughtful and I don't think this movie succeeds. It's just really hard because then it just comes off as plot mechanics, which is, I think, a little distasteful.
Yeah, it is. It sort of feels like this movie is like a bunch of anthology stories put together, and doesn't always feel like it connects. There feels like there's the flashback scenes are an anthology story. The like our marriage isn't working, so let's try this is sort of anthology. The actual escape is sort of an anthology. The disfigured guy is sort of like it's just. As I was watching it, I just kept waiting for the moment when it kind of all came together and kind of clicked and worked. And when you get to the end of the film, and I think the last 10 minutes are kind of silly. I don't hate it. Like there are people who really hate that last 10 minutes. I don't hate it as much as them. I think it's silly and you didn't need it. But I just kept waiting for the moment where it kind of all came together. And it's like the point of this entire story is all these things connect together in what way? And it felt like they had a bunch of puzzle pieces and they kind of jammed them together, but they didn't really have them all connect. So you get to the end of the film.
They tell you it connects, but they don't naturally connect.
Yeah, it's like this connects. And you're like, but does it though? And you get to the end of it, and it's just a somewhat unsatisfying film in that you spent this entire time being kind of strung along, told that there's going to be a point at which this all is kind of revealed to you. And then when it happens, you don't believe it. And then they don't really ever do a better job of tying it all together. So you get to the end of the film and you go, okay, that happened.
It connects because she accidentally cut herself because she was mad about her father doing it. So then she thinks about cutting her fucking wrists to get out of the thing. That's such an artificial or a very slim connection to connect her trauma to her survival capabilities.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I'm just very, very, very confused of why. Like, I don't understand where, I mean, is the problem the screenplay? Do you think that they didn't like, or is this like just, maybe this is like Stephen
It's the
King
story,
problem?
the source material. We don't say screenplay, but it's the source material, and I think it's a famously hard to adapt thing that a lot of people found successful with this, because it is in a sense, in one place she's stuck in a bed for the whole length of the story or the movie, which I think many movies have done this well that kind of contained one place, one person by themselves, where this movie did not learn its lessons from that and tried to do so much to make it interesting outside of it by having the visions of the other people and having flashbacks. They just didn't like depend enough on audiences being entertained and watching her survival alone in bed, which I think might have been a smarter route to take it. They had like so much gimmickiness in it because they didn't trust that it would be interesting on its own, but it maybe would have.
Honest question. If you get rid of the killer, the Moonlight Man, is this a better movie?
No, I don't think that honestly doesn't bother me in the movie.
No, I'm not saying I hate it. I just don't. I sort of think that the idea that there's actually a real bad guy in that scenario, rather than just she got stuck to the bed because of, a ridiculous situation, and then
I'm just saying the killer doesn't bother me like at all. Like that's not my issue with the film, because I see it as a thematic connection piece, and them trying to do that, like make it connect the theme so forcefully upsets me. I honestly think that's the smartest way they connect the thematic pieces compared to what they're doing with the rest of the movie. So I that's not my issue.
I don't know. I just think that character's kind of.
It creates a little bit of mystery and eeriness, but it is a weird character and maybe a little insensitive of like people with disabilities and physical deformities.
It is a bit like 1970s. Like 1970s is very into like all serial killers are like
monster.
Well, yeah, they're not just moral monsters. They're physical monsters too. Yeah, it's one of those. You said you have problems with the sexual politics of this film.
I kind of addressed it. I think just the sexual abuse is used a little exploitatively without it thinking it is.
Mm-hmm.
To a way that I think is uncomfortable. When they're like she survives because she's a harassment survivor. It's like her superpower, and there's always something a little uncomfortable rather than dealing with the actual pain that is coming from that. And it's also like how much like She is defined by her harassment in this movie, by her abuse, and they don't give her anything else other than being defined by that and coming through it, of course. But there's just not more to that character.
Yeah. I will say I think Carla Gugino is quite good.
Also, here's some. This is where maybe I'm going a little too far with my sexual politics.
Go ahead, sir.
They act like the rape fantasy is only problematic because of her past trauma. That if she is not past abused, then there's nothing wrong with the way Gerald was treating her before, which is, I think, essentially because it does become non-consensual pretty quickly.
Yes. Yes.
I think they have to create a reason for why she was uncomfortable with that rather than just be naturally he's doing a horrible thing.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having a specific fantasy like that. There are people who have it. The importance is, yes, of course, that
you can debate whether it's wrong to have a rape fantasy. I think it might be pretty wrong.
I actually don't think it's wrong if it's a fantasy rather than something you're actually, people do it because it's about control and stuff. That's what rape is about. I don't think it's wrong to have the fantasy, but you're right. The thing that really is not clear in the film is that the problem is that he attempts to act out a fantasy without his partner having any idea that it's about to happen or any say in it.
The movie actually gets a problem because she was also
she has past trauma, not because she agreed to a sort of like bondage fantasy relationship thing going on there, and was then met with some kind of like loss of control being forced on situation. Yeah, it's the big problem is there. Like, that's a weird.
Do you know what else this movie's pretty negative on? Erectile dysfunction. Like she definitely like looks at those pills, but like he doesn't like love me or attract me because he needs to use Viagra. That really makes him less, of a man, rather than just being a natural part of a man's sex cycle. It has nothing to do with attraction. Some people just can't get hard. They made it seem like a really negative quality to his romance and his life that he had to use.
So I think in the context of the film, it makes sense why she'd use it negatively. It's because he was hiding it from her initially. That was, I think, what she was mad about.
I don't really know why that's an issue either.
Well, you shouldn't be like.
They could be embarrassed. It's not like. It's like maybe not a good marriage contract, but it's not a good marriage. Super ethically horrible. Like he's just embarrassed about it.
Well, I think it's bad for your relationship if you have to,
They made it seem like he's a monster because he's like taking Viagra.
Well, I mean, I feel like he seems like he might be a monster for other reasons. He doesn't necessarily seem like the best person. That's also just like a weird character in that. I think this is part of the problem. You're supposed to believe a lot about her husband and how her husband is a continuation of her father. Except through flashback, we see the problem with her father. We don't, or at least an understanding of what the problem with her father is. We don't. What is really the problem with Bruce Greenwood? We don't really know. We sort of are given like these hints to it. But he seems like he's a little busy with work and that
a little hard to connect. He's just like a rich douche, I guess. I don't know.
But
they had that one story about him telling a sex joke that maybe he doesn't respect women, but who knows?
Yeah, it was such a weird comment. It was like, he once told a sex joke that was in really bad taste, and that made me think, like, it just that the jump
from the true you that you are also like, as like derogatory towards women, but that's like.
How many people? Because like this is like a genuine question. How many people in their life have told? Everyone has told a joke that was in really poor taste.
No, let's not defend the joke here.
No, I'm not defending the joke. I'm saying that there are a lot of people in their lives who have said a joke in a moment that was in really poor taste and was not a good idea to say in that moment, but was not emblematic of their entire personality or character. It was just them saying something really stupid and not thinking about the surroundings they were in. So like the idea that we're just jumping.
I think it's enough for her, like, and as a person, to question. Do I like fully know him? Is he a different person than I think he is? Because I just never would expect him to say a joke like this. But it's not like deep enough for a movie for us to see someone in a different light, to see someone as a negative thing. But in a real life situation, for you just like to have that thought, like, do I fully understand the man I'm with? Yes, but that's not like the movie's also dealing with like sexual harassment by a father. That moment comes off so slight.
Yeah, it just doesn't. The comparison that the movies tend to make about how her dad did this and then her husband did this, they just don't seem like to be on the same level, and you don't really understand why those two are being, like equated to each other. You're a little bit confused as a viewer, being like, okay, I get why the dad is terrible, and I get why the dad did terrible things to you and messed you up and like did all this stuff. I don't really understand why the husband is being lumped into the same boat, and the fact that you kill him so quickly means that we never really get to learn the answer.
Because they literally are trying to make a connection that she has been controlled by fear by all the men in her life. They can make three people to do this with her dad, her husband, and Sloth, essentially. The murder. They're controlling her with fear, but you never fully understand the fear that he creates, that Bruce Greenwood creates. So how is he one of the people and you don't really understand the box that he's kept her in.
I mean, do you not know who the Moonlight Man is?
Because he also was like pretty listening to her, like about the steak, which was like a fucking bad idea because the dog's still there and eating the male. So they don't give her enough accountability for feeding that stray, scary ass dog. But in a moment, like he kind of comes off pretty well. He's like, I was like wrong. That's feed him the steak. This is what I like about you. That's not someone who keeps someone in a box that says, yeah, you had the right idea. Feed him this $200 steak. It
is a weird moment to be like, this person is bad. Even though they like, you just took a $200 steak and he didn't get mad at you, and
he's bad because he.
In all scenarios, the normal response to you just fed a dog a $200 steak is that anyone would be like, "Hey, what the hell why did you feed a $200 steak to a dog?" Like I feel like most people would be like annoyed at that because that's a really poor choice of money. But like, he's very chill about that, and it's like I don't understand again. Maybe he is a terrible person. I don't understand.
Well, he does a good job telling you that. Rape fantasy. That's where he seems villainous, is because he takes that past consent. But the backstory of why she might have felt that way long before that she was controlling does not exist as him being a negative person. But that moment does.
Yeah, it's a movie that it feels like it has a lot of things. It is trying. It is telling you it's saying a lot of things. It is not showing me a lot of the same things. And it does kind of a poor job explaining why he is somebody keeping her in a prison. And it also does kind of a poor job connecting everything that's going on. I will say, though, the Moonlight Man, the serial killer, is played by the same guy who plays the butler from the Addams Family.
Fucking rules. Okay. From the original Addams Family?
I'd leave all the Addams Family.
Should we just start talking about the Addams Family now for the next hour and change this to an Addams Family episode?
The fact we have not done an Addams Family episode is kind of crazy, but
Wait, do you love Addams Family as much as I do?
Dude, I love both Addams Family movies.
Okay, yeah, they rule. I should watch them. I'm going to watch them both for Halloween.
Addams Family Values, so good.
Yeah.
My girlfriend made me watch those two movies. I'm not planning on watching them.
I watched them a lot as a kid.
It's very, very good. Very big fun. Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts on Gerald's game? Any other big takes?
No big takes. I mean, we didn't talk about performances, but it is a pretty good Carla Gugino performance, and showcase for her. I think she's pretty solid. She can handle the screen time for when she's all by herself in an interesting way, in the way she hasn't given a chance to.
Yeah, what's the last? I was trying to think of this. What's the last good performance from her? She has her career is rough.
Yeah, not sure.
She's the voice of something in some Superman movies.
She gives an engaging performance, and even as her vision of herself, and is a whole different character in a way. It's the strength of her visualized, but I even find that performance pretty commanding.
Yeah, I think she's really good. She's one of these people that I think is sadly I don't think ever necessarily got the shake she deserved in Hollywood. If you look through her career, it's just a lot of bad movies and a lot of playing the sixth character who is the wife of somebody.
Yeah.
Gerald's game. I guess we've covered it. Unless you have, I don't have any really final thoughts on this. Yeah, I think I understand it. It just doesn't tie everything together. It has a lot of ideas, which I feel again. I say this as somebody who has not read Stephen King, but it's read people talking about Stephen King. Having a lot of ideas and not necessarily tying them all together seems like a somewhat of a common Stephen King problem.
Yeah.
That he has a lot of ideas and is not always great at the actual mechanics of, putting everything together.
Or with the right touch to handle serious material. It's never like as smartly dealt with as it can, or it seems like a plot device rather than having a real discussion of this trauma.
He doesn't seem to have a real problem with like child sexual trauma being like not necessarily treated as a serious and incredibly impactful and harmful event.
Yeah. And just to really pull us full circle and connect it back to Mike Flanagan a bit, is I do think there's not as much of a display, I think, of his tonal issues that I have, but there definitely is still that moroseness and that quietness that I think serves us wrong too, because then you just focus so much on the abuse and the drama of all that, just kind of depressing without it ever being as engaging as a survival piece can be, because you're just so in the trenches of the woe and the misery.
This also to me feels like a Mike Flanagan piece in that he is given something that is hard to adapt, and rather than like really take a hard stance or like have a real take on it and try to like swing for the fences, he kind of does the safest version of this adaptation, something that will never be incredibly impressive, but also won't be a complete bomb. He's not willing to take that. It might be a 5-star, but it might be a 1-star swing. So he just kind of goes down the middle and kind of just does the 3-star.
Yeah.
Gerald's Game. We talked about it. Yay. Mike Flanagan. Next week, we're coming back and we're talking about the most talented director we've talked about this month.
Sure.
With Ari Aster's Midsommar. I have a case, and I can argue. I will make my case for why I think Ari Aster is a more talented director.
I need to see one more movie.
Jordan Peele. I will say, and it's a specific take. It's about.
I think if you just analyze Midsommar, I see it.
See, I love Hereditary too. So I will say this. My precursor, I will say, it's all about their grasp of the technical aspects of directing.
But it's a special movie we're going to talk about. Very special, I think.
And the only director that we've covered in the podcast where I have watched all their movies in theaters.
Because there's only 2.
I know, but we've covered. I only saw one of Jordan Peele's, and I saw Midsommar. I saw.
What did you not see in theaters? You didn't see Us in theaters?
I didn't see Get Out in theaters.
You're fucking psycho. Where were you?
I don't know. I just kind of missed that one. And then I saw Hereditary opening day.
I saw Get Out opening weekend.
Nice.
I'm cool.
Yeah. Clearly. Next week we're doing Ari Aster, and we're doing Midsommar, and even more than that, we're doing the craziest thing we've ever done. We're covering the director's cut of Midsommar, which you can acquire. I believe you can, if you buy it on Apple, is the best way to acquire it. Yes. It is 170 minutes, so it's like, I believe, 30 minutes longer. It's like 35 minutes longer. And it's supposed to be like a more complete version of the story, and especially like more. The
thing is, I'm not going to be able to tell you what works about it because I'm not going to know what's the difference.
There are websites that will allow me to look up the differences. There's a great website out there. I don't remember the name. I'll mention it in our next episode where you can go.
Things I'm just going to assume it's something.
And it'll tell you like what's the difference between like even like down by the seconds and the shots and like the specific characters between original and director's cut. But yeah, that's what we're doing next week. We're doing Midsommar. Like, comment, do whatever you want on the YouTube. If you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify or any of our other audio platforms, give us a follow, leave us a comment, leave us a review, do all the nice things. If you prefer using a specific platform to listen to your podcast and we are not on them, please send us an email. The emails are in the description, and I will do my best to get that our podcast up on whatever streaming service you'd like, so it is easily accessible to all. Thank you everyone for listening. Gerald's Game, we talked about it. Next week, Midsommar. Peace out, folks. Have a wonderful evening.
Good riddance. Goodbye.